Well, Democrats are celebrating after winning key races in Virginia and Kentucky in Tuesday's elections. In Kentucky, State Attorney General Andy Beshear says that he defeated incumbent Republican Governor Matt Bevin. I say that he says it because right now the race is in fact too close to call officially. But as of now, Beshear leads by about 5,000 votes, while Governor Bevin has refused to concede.
Oh, and over in Virginia, Democrats took full control of the state's legislature for the first time in more than 2 decades. The win means the party now holds the state House, Senate, and the governor's mansion. Governor Ralph Northam celebrated the news yesterday.
The voters like the progress that we as Democrats have made over the past few years, and they want us to continue that progress over the next few years and beyond then.
All right, for more on this, let's bring in Antjuan Seawright and Lauren Claffey in Washington. Antjuan is a CBSN political contributor and a Democratic strategist. Lauren is a Republican strategist. Good to have you both. So, Antjuan, let's start with you, and let's start with Virginia. As we just said, Democrats just had a huge win there. How was the party able to take back full control of the state's legislature?
Treating Virginia as a marathon, not a sprint, an investment, not an expense. And it did not happen overnight because Virginia did not change overnight. But I think we started making investments in places where we knew we were weak and started to pivot away from trying to win all elections at one time versus chipping away at the block bit by bit. And I think we had success. You know, Virginia has always been what I describe as the political measuring cup, particularly in off-year elections, about how the general election will go, which is also important in that, that journey towards the White House. So if this is an indication, and the last election in Virginia was an indication, I think we are well positioned to do well come next year. I will just say this about Virginia and about all of these elections that happened last night. Usually the people who are impacted the most participate the least. But what we saw last night was the opposite of that, and I think that means that the temperature and the mood of the country is starting to change.
And Antjuan, you pointed this out just a couple hours ago, that it's so significant for the Democrats because it is a census year,
right,
which means it puts control of redistricting in the hands of the Democrats, which could mean the power tipped in their favor for many, many years to come. But Lauren,
for 10 years.
There you go. Lauren, I want to ask you, what does this tell us about Virginia's political landscape in the upcoming 2020 elections?
Yeah, I think it reinforces the problem that the Republicans are going to have as far as not appealing enough to urban and suburban voters. I mean, as much as we like to think of Virginia still as a swing state, and I think that that could be debatable now, they've had huge demographic shifts with a lot of people moving into this state. It's become a lot more liberal, and I think that's part of what we saw in last night's election.
You know, Lauren, the other thing I thought was really kind of remarkable, I know we're talking about Virginia and Kentucky, but Josh Holmes, who worked for Mitch McConnell for many years, tweeted something that I thought was really interesting. He tweeted, taking a step back from Kentucky and looking at all the elections last night, GOP should be most concerned about what happened in local elections in Chester, Delaware, and Bucks County, Pennsylvania last night. This is genuinely alarming if you know the voting history. A lot of people are pointing to the fact that Democrats are turning out in droves in some of these suburbs.
Yeah.
And Republican participation is down big time. What do you attribute that to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that you see across the country as a lot of people move into the urban areas. There's a lot of, you know, people always say like the suburban moms and this type of thing, soccer moms in different elections. They've called them different things, but basically they're just more moderate voters that are sometimes independent. They vote based on security, pocketbook issues, those types of things. And also they're very sensitive to rhetoric and the political climate at the time. So they're actually, you know, there's been an increase in that. I think the Republicans have not been appealing to them lately, and they've been doubling down on sort of this more their base, their rural constituencies. And so they're going to have to make a better appeal to these voters, especially in regards to health care and some of these other issues, that kitchen table issues that they care about.
So, Antjuan, a lot has been made of the the governor's race in Kentucky. I've gone back and forth as to whether or not this was kind of like a bellwether thing or not, because you have a governor that really wasn't that popular to begin with. But why do you suppose there was so much attention on this race? Antjuan?
Well, number one, I think the governor of Virginia has failed. I'm sorry, the governor of Kentucky had failed the people of Kentucky on major issues, quality of life issues, the two most important, health care and education. And when teachers organize and when they activate and they mobilize and they show up to vote not against their own interests, big things happen in their favor. The pension issue was a huge issue. The fact that the governor threatened to take away Medicaid expansion to that state that has been, in my mind, a gold nugget for the state of Kentucky. I think those two things combined made a big difference, and the rhetoric that the governor found himself using was very reflective of the rhetoric we see from the leader of the free world. And at the end of the day, while it's cute for Twitter and it may be good for right meat, red wing rhetoric, it's not good for everyone who's got to think about feeding their family and how all that plays into their overall quality of life. So I think those things were a combined failure, and I think it's a solid rejection of the type of politics that people want going forward. At the end of the day, I've learned from being around this business for 15 years, it's easier to vote against something than it is to vote for something. And I think last night in Kentucky was a vote against the governor and a vote for, actually, a new style leadership that the state has been missing for a very long time.
And yet, Lauren, we should point out that although the governor's race seemingly has gone to a Democrat, across the state, Republicans overwhelmingly defeated their Democratic opponents in local elections in the entire state. There were 5 other elections there that Republicans won. And I do note that President Trump was just in Kentucky campaigning for not just the governor, but all those other Republicans who were running as well.
And he even sort of framed it in his speeches that, you know, if you don't vote for this guy, it's basically a vote against me.
Against
like, I don't
me,
know.
and you can't let that happen.
Right.
Well, it happened.
Yeah, I think Bevin was uniquely unpopular, and I think it goes to show that it's really difficult to nationalize these state elections. I mean, voters still care very much what's going on in their backyard, and they know their state politicians, and so it's really important to make sure that those state politicians are talking about state issues. And I think one of the things that the Democratic candidate in Kentucky had going for him was that he ran a very moderate campaign. He was not campaigning on Medicare for all and some of these more progressive national issues that the Democratic Party is pushing. He was running a campaign that appealed to moderate voters. And so I do think that that had an impact, and that's also why you saw the Republicans take the rest of the ballots, all the other elections down.
And the other thing that Beshear did is he went out into sort of the small towns, out into what you would call, quote unquote, Trump country, and was shaking hands and that sort of thing. And I wonder if you think that had an impact, too, on the way the votes went.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to show up. I mean, he ran a very strategic campaign and made appeals. And again, he knew that there was vulnerability there because Bevin was so deeply unpopular in the state and had upset so many people, especially with the pension issue. And you think about Trump country and those types of voters, that was a big issue for them.
And so, Antjuan, Lauren makes a good point, which is the idea that the person who won in Kentucky, which Trump won big in 2016, is a moderate. Again, pointing to the fact that there are a lot of people in the Democratic Party who say, look, when it comes to 2020, with the crop of candidates that we have right now, these local elections, as Tip O'Neill, the former Speaker of the House, used to say, all politics is local. And what people are not looking for are extreme ideas on the left. They want moderate positions. They want, and look, it may be troublesome to some younger voters, but they kind of want more of the same. They want what they're used to.
Well, Vlad, you know, I often remind people I'm an unapologetic center-left type Democrat because I grew up in the South. I've been doing elections all over this country. I know what it takes to win. The bottom line for all of us as Democrats is the top of the ticket will bear some responsibility for the bottom of the ticket. If we want to maintain that fragile, precious majority we have in the Congress, we're going to have to run on a pragmatic center-left approach to messaging, particularly on issues like health care, which will lead the way for us going into this next election. And while you can say Kentucky is isolated because only one person, one Democrat, won statewide, at the end of the day, that's the meal ticket in a state like Kentucky. The governor will have jurisdiction to make some big decisions that will impact everyone's quality of life. And the other down ballot races who may be statewide does not have the same impact. But if we don't get back to the center as Democrats and run a very center-left pragmatic approach to our campaigning and to our messaging, I think there could be trouble for us down the road next year and for years to come.
All right.
All right, Antjuan Seawright, Lauren Claffey, we thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.